Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul. In this video we're breaking down A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Spoilers are coming, and this episode is filled with some big Easter eggs and a big sausage as well. We are back in Westeros though, and this episode was so endearing I had a grin on my face the whole time. While it doesn't contain the political intrigue or weaving narrative of the other shows, it's a fantastically charming piece of world building. There's also probably the best jousting scene I think I've seen in a long time, and lots of big things to talk about. Big!
Johnson. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can't show Sir Orlan's massive broadsword, but we begin with seeing a big sausage. Over the top of this, we hear Dunk telling his story as he tries to appeal to the knights and lords at the tourney. Carrying on from last week, all Dunk needs is someone to remember the late Hedge Knight so he can then enter the lists. I just love the juxtaposition between Dunk telling Orlan's story of being a chivalrous knight, and all the while we see him pissing outside after banging a villager. It mirrors the end of the episode when Dunk realizes that Orlan wasn't some great knight, as he whored and never won a tourney. However, as we've seen in the other two shows, he's an absolute saint compared to most of the people in Westeros. I love the way that this and the prior episode though basically start and end the same way, with Dunk remembering his master and then journeying through the day. I feel like every episode might be a day in the life of that begins at daybreak and then ends with the night. It would of course brilliantly play off the word night and just set up a nice pace of how these episodes are going to play out. Now, Orlan has of course fought in many battles in war, and in this intro we see how he died. We can see a cut on him that he ends up covering up, and he's very clearly a little worse for wear. Now this cut gets infected and over time just simply rots away. Being a lowly Hedge Knight, he wouldn't have the opportunity to be seen by a maester, and it's also essentially medieval England where they didn't have the medical advancements we have today. So yeah, you're the walking dead, sorry. When it came to his death, the book described him as having a chill, which he ended up dying from. Always read this as him succumbing from the flu or even the common cold, especially as they were often soaked to the bone in the rain. Dunk does describe Orlan as being someone who just gets on with life even when he was dying. He tried to be a benefit to the people around them and even gave a villager a coin. I did wonder if this was also part of the peasant levies that Dunk described that Orlan fought with. May just be the owner of the place that he stepped in though, who let him have a bed for the night. On the right though, you can see the woman that Orlan spent the night with covering herself up with a blanket. Go on, mate! This is probably someone who he's just met on his last job, and I doubt it was ever anything meaningful. Orlan had no children or lands, and being a Hedge Knight was a rather lonely existence. They probably just rode about and then stayed somewhere like this, helped out people there, got a bed, and then rode somewhere else. Orlan is in very high spirits, so after just getting his end away, and he starts singing while they ride on to serve someone else. Come on, Dunk! Now this song is actually in the book, and this moment's something that Dunk thought about as he buried his former master. As Dunk then presents this flashback, we see how Orlan slowly succumbed to the infection and over time just started to drift away. It's a really great way to show Orlan's story though, and as we see, this is Dunk telling the tale to a lord. He's trying to get him to remember him and recounting all of his great journeys in the best light possible. We then see the pair fighting in a field, which is a lot more like them just having fun. It's vastly different to how the Fossaway sparring was last week, and just nowhere near as intricate or skillful. Lads just smashing the shield like the like button, and we see as Orlan gets weaker and Dunk has to pick him up. Dunk then mentions House Florent, who are from the Reach and loyal to House Tyrell. The Tyrells come from Highgarden, and they've of course appeared a lot throughout the franchise. Now this story in itself is actually from the books. Orlan made a lot of money from serving the house, and at one point even tried to get Dunk laid. Dunk uses this to appeal to Lord Hayford and mentions that Orlan fought at Redgrass with the Lord's brother. This lord specifically was mentioned in the books, with him appearing during the Sworn Sword story. This happened in the time of the Blackfire Rebellion, which tore the Seven Kingdoms apart. In this, Aegon IV knighted his bastard son Daemon and bestowed the Sword of Blackfire on him. Thus, some saw him as being the true successor to the throne. This is something that they've touched upon in House of the Dragon, and how if you wear the Conqueror's armor, hold the Conqueror's sword, you're basically going to be what people see as being the next in line. During Daeron II's reign, people then became dissatisfied with him, and Daemon grew up to be likened to Aegon the Conqueror. After peace was made with Dawn, the former bastard was then urged to launch a claim for the throne. So, very House of the Dragon-y again. The Battle of Redgrass then happened, which was a decisive battle in the Civil War that ultimately led to its conclusion. This was the battle where Orlan's nephew died at, and this led to Dunk becoming the replacement. The nephew was mentioned in the other Dunk and Egg stories as well, and featured in the Sworn Sword comic. It's a big bloody battle that Orlan just preferred not to talk about, possibly due to his nephew dying, but judging by the trailer, we may be seeing it soon. Now, I don't think that's spoiling because it's guessing what's coming, but anything that is a spoiler, we will save for the big spoiler section at the end. Fucking hell, this names get worse every week. Anyway, this is Leo Tyrell, who plays a big part in the story of things to come. So far, we're only in the setup stage, but if you want to see what's coming down the line, then definitely go click our breakdown of the Weeks Ahead trailer. Now in the book, he's described as a very strong fighter, and Duncan Allen actually served him at Highgarden. Sadly, Leo doesn't recognise the name or them, and thus he continues going to others to beg. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Okay, so a lot of you don't know, but I used to be a web designer before becoming a big world-famous terrible YouTuber. With my clients though, we often found that though we could set things up, it was just like handing off something that none of them actually knew how to use. Plus, a lot of them were creating a growing brand and didn't really want things nailed down like we initially had. If you're in that position without any real idea on how to design or where you necessarily want to take things, then Squarespace is for you. Squarespace uses design intelligence to empower anyone to build beautiful, more personalized websites tailored to their unique needs. Without any expertise, you can craft a bespoke digital identity to use across your entire online presence. Due to their professionally designed website template, you can get an incredible looking site online in less than an hour. They have options for every category that lets you customize your look, update content, and add features to fit your needs. Templates with these kind of systems, you know, they can really often be generic, but Squarespace lets you transform yours so it looks unique on every device. With Squarespace, you can also sell products on an online store designed to stand out. Showcase your products and customize your product listings with images, videos, reviews, related products, and add-ons that will help you make more sales. The Squarespace commerce platform makes managing everything from inventory to sales and customers simple. You can also print labels directly through Squarespace to save time when you're fulfilling orders. That's absolutely amazing, and you can head to squarespace.com for a free trial whenever you're ready to launch. Go to squarespace.com/heavyspoilers and use the code HEAVYSpoilers to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/heavyspoilers and use the code HEAVYSpoilers to get 10% off. Thanks. Now he watches Dunk and Egg move through the camp and pass the Baratheon banners. Egg says Olin must have been a shit night, and to be fair, yeah, he kinda was, mate, but at least he wasn't a twat like Sir Criston Cole. Dunk then tells Egg to go back to the camp, but Egg says that he will not leave his knight. He also says that it isn't right that he has to go and ask the Lord's permission.
This is undignified, sir.
Lad speaks about dignity and is rather posh, which is laying the groundwork for things to come. To Egg though, he's a knight of the realm and should be able to enter the lists without all this grovelling. Dunk also has clearly lived a childish fantasy of how these things work, which was likely an impression given to him by the old man. Egg also seems to know a lot about knights and is wise beyond his years. He tells him that he doesn't need permission and can just ride in and turn his arsehole into a lance hole. He's clearly used to viewing things from a position where you can just do what you want, and yeah, he obviously just joined Dunk without asking for permission. We'll talk about what this means later on, but I love that we're seeing this side with Egg.
Why do you treat these royal lapdogs like they're your betters?
They are my betters.
Dunk knows he has to follow the customs of the land as well, as this is the only way he'll get ahead. It's like his own mini Game of Thrones where you just have to play along with everything to get what you want. Yeah, it's unjust, but that's because the lords were born into houses and thus they get to rule over everyone. They think that the world and everything should bow before them, and ultimately this is what leads to all the wars. They're mean and selfish and take what they want, while Olin and Dunk are nice and have to beg for scraps and fight and die in their battles. The pair are then interrupted by apparently the most famous family in Westeros. Who are they?
Can't you see the banners, you giant cunt?
Oh, the Targaryens, of course. This moment is right out of the book though, minus the swear word. Egg then sheepishly says he better go back to the camp, which is a bit strange considering he wanted to stay with Dunk before. Anyway, all this following dialogue that was actually said at the camp the night before when Dunk discovered Egg. Basically there, Dunk says that if Egg robs him, he'll chase after him with dogs. And we even get this line from the book where Egg fires back and says he doesn't have any, and Dunk says he'll get some. Now in the book we get insight into Dunk's thoughts here, and he somewhat sees looking after Egg as paying back a debt to Olin. I'm a great fool to trust the boy so far, but it's no more than the old man did for me, he reflected. The mother must have sent him to me so that I could pay my debt. Now in the book, the Dragon Lord's arrival actually happened just after Dunk tried to enter the lists the day before. Dunk was also in the stables there, opposed to the pavilion, but they do somewhat bring that scene back round. Now, though it should have been in episode 1, mate, technically, actually, I think it's smarter holding the Targaryens off until now. Episode 1 introduced us to a hell of a lot of characters, and the Targaryens in the book at that point didn't really advance the plot that much. So yeah, it's just more economic to introduce some characters and then introduce some more here. Now as for the family, we have Baelor, Maekar, Valar and Aerion. They're here for the tourney and we meet Lord Ashford and his daughter. In the book, the tourney was in honour of the daughter's 13th name day, aka 13th birthday. She also does look slightly different how she's described in the text, as that says she's got yellow hair and a pink round face. Now when it comes to the structure of the family, Baelor's the current hand of the king and brother to Maekar. The pair's dad is Daeron II, who's the current king of the Seven Kingdoms. He'll be playing a major part in the story moving forward, which is something that we'll talk about in the spoiler section. As we see in the episode, Baelor's probably the most reasonable and down to earth of the Targaryens, especially when you compare it to like House of the Dragon. This isn't a characteristic that all of them share, but it has been done to keep the house popular. You see, back in the day, that they were like regarded as gods that could command dragons out the sky. With the dragons dead though, yeah, no one really gives a fuck. We even see later down the line how people will stand up to the Mad King, and then Dany will be left as an outcast. The showrunners have said that because they've lost their dragons now, they need to be seen as caring for the small folk, which is something that Baelor embodies. That's why he's been picked as the next in line, because he's got lots of compassion, will listen to people, and isn't a massive dickhead. At this point in time though, they're just pretty much the same as any other house. Now on the opposite side of Baelor, we have characters like Aerion. His hair's an opposite, his attitude's an opposite, and he definitely doesn't subscribe like Baelor does. In the book, he's got long locks of blonde hair, as you can see here from the artwork. However, I actually think this Billy Idol look is a bit more dickish. The prince basically struts in, acting like he owns the place, confuses Dunk for being a stable boy, and the dialogue here is all right out the book.
I'm not a stable boy, my lord. My lord pardons, I'm no serving man either. I have the honour to be a knight.
Finn Bennett is just excellent as the smug and stuck-up Aerion, and we see how entitled he is when he demands wine and a pretty wench, which is exactly what he says in the book. Even when corrected by Dunk though, he shows no humility and just insults him even further.
Knighthood has fallen on sad days.
The difference between the attire is also stark, with Aerion wearing fine velvet and chainmail. It's something Dunk could only ever dream of affording, and the Hedge Knight really shows his true colours compared to this knobhead prince. Aerion's horse loses it and kicks one of the stable boys, which Aerion isn't even there to care about. He just parked it up and fucked off. Dunk is then left to calm it down, and this shows us that he indeed has this good nature. And the horse bloody loves him as well. I also wonder if there's a comment here on kind of knowing your place and unfortunately defaulting to it when there's a higher up around you. Despite saying he's not a stable boy, he does lead the horse into the stable and then talks to it like an animal lover would. Dunk's then interrupted by the King's Guard, whom he also meets in the book. However, this takes place after he's left the stables to try and sell a horse. Either way, these are Sir Ronald Crackenhall and Sir Donald of Duskendale. Now this is definitely my favourite Kingsguard armour design, as it appears more like how it was described in the Game of Thrones. Jaime Lannister, in the show looked vastly different, as did Criston Cole's in House of the Dragon. But here, they've nailed the book accuracy, and it's such a cool Easter egg. Especially with how dragon wing-like it looks. Now in case you don't know, these gods basically consist of 7 knights who are forbidden from holding lands, marrying or fathering children, and basically you're in the job for life. This is why Criston was so torn up about how he took an oath and then slept with Rhaenyra, and then basically Rhaenyra rejected him and he turned into a snivelling bitch. Now the pair here also look a bit different to how they're depicted in the book's illustrations. In general, long hair just seems to have been omitted from most of the show characters. However, Peter Claffrey did have long hair at the show's premiere and press, so he may have it for season 2. Now Sir Donald here was also mentioned in A Feast for Crows when Jaime Lannister asks Loras Tyrell if he's aware of him. That's the second last book of Song and Ice, and I will say second last because I don't know if we're getting any more, mate. But I'm praying. Roland isn't mentioned elsewhere, but in this he's impressed by Dunk's size. In the book, Dunk considers him to be the best knight in the realm except for Baelor, so I do think they'll add him in a bit more to the series. He then asks if there's anywhere he can dump out. It's implied that he's of higher birth, as Donald says his sworn brother would hold it in as there's no proper place. The Crackles themselves are descended from the First Men, and one of Roland's future family members was the first to discover that Jaime had slain the Mad King. We then get a bit more of a story about Donald in the episode compared to the books. He explains that his family are crabbers, and it makes it sound like he had a humble upbringing. But this isn't necessarily the case. Duskendale is near Blackwater Bay, and we've seen this location lots of times, including when Gunther Darkland was executed in House of the Dragon. Donald's family owns most of the ships as well, which shows just how naive that poor old Dunk is. Now, this moment spurs him on to think he could even go on to join the King's Guard if a lowly crabber managed to join this very prestigious group. Dunk then asks how the son of a crabber had the honour of becoming a knight in the King's Guard, and Dunk's a bit confused by Donald's response. He implies that he did it by grit, hard work, and maybe a bit of cunning. Naive old Dunk, though, is absolutely clueless. We'll talk about that more in just a bit, but I love the interaction that follows with the stable boy asking if he's Baelor.
Are you Baelor Targaryen?
No.
Then would you move the fuck out of the way?
He's got no clues when it comes to social cues or sarcasm, but we do see some initiative. A worker accidentally leaves the door open and Dunk follows her through the tunnels into Ashford Castle. However, in the book, he just asks to be let in, and lords tend to hate that one simple trick. I do think that this is a lot better for his character though, and it makes sense story-wise. In the source material, he's just somehow in earshot of the next scene, whereas here we kind of see his cunning. The knights just talk to him about seeking opportunity, and he's now doing that exact same thing, so it builds brilliantly off that conversation. Now, it turns out that two of Maekor's sons are missing, with this being Daeron and Aegon. Lord Ashford assumes that they might just be delayed, which angers Maekor because it's a very serious matter. Baelor reminds his brother not to curse their hosts, and as mentioned before, they need to be on the charm offensive. The showrunners have basically said the public's starting to wonder why they let this weird incestuous family rule when they no longer have dragons. It also means that a character like Lord Ashford can invite the royal family for his tournament. In previous airs, even nice guys like Viserys would have said fuck that bozo, but now they're having to go to all these things. It's kind of like how these days you'll see the royal family like constantly having to go around to events and open up like a new Greggs or something. They've got to play favour with the common folk. Now, though I say the royal family, Daeron the king hasn't gone himself, so Maekor's a bit annoyed that his dad forced him to attend this miserable circus. And, mate, Lord Ashford, he's right there, mate, right there. On the whole as well, these tournaments were very expensive and basically like a My Sweet 16 birthday party where the parents throw a massive do and buy the kid a car.
40,000 gold dragons to the champion, 20,000 to the runner-up, 20,000 to the winning archer.
So Ashford's basically spending handsome sums to get mugged off in his own hall by some blonde inbred like yeast motherfucker who don't even have dragons. Balin then says that Daeron has done this before, which is a line right out the book. He also says that Maekor should not have made him enter the lists. In the books, Daeron has no interest in fighting, and I believe the line is he'd rather ride a whore than a horse. At this point, we then cut to Dunk, who's waiting outside, and the show does differ with how we meet Lord Ashford's daughter. She's called Lady Gwyn, and though she isn't named in the text, they do basically have the tournament called Gwyn, and yeah, the rules of it kind of revolve around winning her hand. The fact that they're expanding this out as well is because I think the show is 6 episodes, and yeah, the book isn't really that long, and thus they need to pepper in these characters to kind of add more to the runtime. She mentions that the prince's sons are missing and probably dead before saying,
Wars have started for less.
This is a great callback to Game of Thrones, and it's actually something Tyrion said in the main series.
Maybe I'll hire this cook of yours.
Wars have been started for less.
It's also a little nod to House of the Dragon, as we know the son for a son thing started the Civil War. On her dress, we can also see suns, which is something from the Ashford House coat of arms. As Dunk stares through into the meeting, we can also see these shapes lining the grate that he looks through. She then calls Dunk big and stupid, which is a theme that repeats throughout the episode. People are constantly calling him dumb and saying that he probably watches Screen Crush. However, I do think he's a heavy spoilers fan at heart and will show that a fool can be brave and quiet in the haters. They then touch upon the missing kids a bit more, and we hear how Sir Roland's the one being sent to find the pair. Their disappearance is going to be a central mystery in the story, and yeah, the pieces are starting to fall in place, but if you're paying close attention, you can figure things out. Despite having no dragons, 2 missing princes is a very big deal. Baelor then says that Darren belongs no more on a Tony field than Aerys or Rhaegal. In the source material, Rhaegal's described as being sickly and meek. On the flip side of this, Aerys was a bookish person who wasn't interested in combat. Maker wants to force his son to change though, which is something that we've seen in the main show. Samuel Tully's father tried to get him to be a great hunter and fighter as opposed to being a nerd. I guess it kind of worked though, as the Night's Watch made him a man and helped him save Westeros from the Walkers. Task failed successfully there. Maker then spots Dunk peering into a hole just like the book. There's actually a great little line about how the seated man was aware he'd been there the whole time. Behind Dunk, we can also see a window in the shape of a star. I did wonder if this was the Faith of the seven-pointed star. However, it's also possible that this is the House Ashford logo that we saw on Gwyn's dress, especially as their motto is "Our sun shines bright." I do think it's a 7, but yeah, just in case it's not, before you start. Just like the book, Baelor then stops Maker from exploding on Dunk and says how they're intruders here. It's here that we can also really see Baelor's Hand of the King badge. Now if you're paying attention, this is the same colour as the one Tyrion was given when he was Hand of the Queen. The main show and House of the Dragon opted to use a gold version, but I do feel like the silver one here is done for a reason. To me, it subtly shows a difference in character. Tyrion is one of the most cunning hands we've ever met, and Baelor comes across that way as well. The shoulders on his outfit are also reminiscent of Daenerys and Rhaenyra's outfit from House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. I love how it then cuts to the Master of the Games, who looks petrified, and Dunk explains why he's there. Ashford then says, "Sword and shield do not make a knight," which is the same as his line in the book. He then tries to get some acknowledgement from Maker, who couldn't give two shits about him. Ashford in general is just no help, but a Hail Mary comes as Dunk asks Baelor if he knew Sir Orlin. In a miraculous bit of luck, Baelor does indeed know him, and he recites the same words from the book. And I guess the shooting star did bring him luck in the end. It also shows that Baelor actually pays attention and cares, whereas the other lords couldn't give a shit. And I'm sure he will make a great king one day. Now, we learn that though Orlin didn't win a Tony, he did have honour. He managed to get the best of Lord Stokeworth and unhorse the Grey Lion. The Stokeworths were mentioned in House of the Dragon as being loyal to Rhaenyra, and they did play a minor part in the Dance of the Dragons. In the book, Baelor then asks him what the Grey Lion's name was, and we get an insight into Dunk's thoughts, as he, even though he's heard this story 1,000 times, he's just completely blank. Daemon Lannister is the character's name though, and he's actually taking part in this tournament. Maker then shows his horrible nature once again and asks how Baelor can remember a hedge knight in a contemptuous tone, which is just like the book. Now this is because Orlin faced Baelor in the tournament and he actually broke 4 lances against him. Baelor made it his business to know his enemies, and this really shows the difference between the two brothers. Dunk then goes to correct him and tell him that it was actually 7 lances that he broke. So brazen that even Maker laughs, but I really appreciate that Dunk's getting more and more confident. The book also gives us some insight into what he's thinking in this moment as it's all going down. No sooner were the words out than he wanted them back. Dunk the lunk, thick as a castle wall, he could hear the old man chiding. In the book and show, he then explains how Sir Orlin used to call him thick and compared him to an aurochs.
The old man, Sir Erlen, he used to say that I was thick as a castle wall and slow as an aurochs.
Which again plays up the perception that he's dumb. Now an aurochs is an extinct type of bovine from which the cows of today are descended. Dunk then explains how Baelor gave Orlin back his horse and armour without any ransom, which shows how Baelor clearly cares about the small folk as well as the hedge knights. I think he sees the bigger picture and knows without the dragons they have to be more tactical. For example, if you keep mugging off your knights, then why would they come and fight and die for you? You've also seen a civil war firsthand and how people often side with those they favour most. Oaths are broken and people choose who they prefer, and in the end you get more flies with honey than you do vinegar. You can massively see Maker's disgust at Baelor's kind gesture though. He's shocked his brother would do something so nice, which probably also explains why Aerion's such a dickhead. Baelor then jokes and says he hopes he isn't king for a few years yet. And poor old Dunk though is just so nervous in this moment, speaking to the royal family, that he can't even joke with them. And again, all this sequence is right out of the books. Maker then tells him to fuck off, but Baelor defends his attitude and explains he's only being a dick because his sons are missing. Dunk then says,
I trust they will not be found dead.
Which is a very awkward moment and is a little bit different to the book. Here he just says he hopes they'll not be found dead, which doesn't go down well. In the book though, he says the rains have probably swollen up the streams and therefore they're likely just delayed. However, what Gwyn said to him before has clearly went into his mind, and yeah, adding her character in earlier and where she wasn't in the book, that changes what he says here. Baelor then tells him that he needs to go and get new arms, as you can only inherit a sigil through blood. Thus, he needs a new sign. Thanking him, Dunk then awkwardly leaves the castle, completely confused over which way to go. He tries to go back the way he came, which was the secret entrance, but of course he needs to go out the front door. And yeah, I just love the attention to detail in the show. In the book, he then compliments the master before leaving and says, "Thank you again, your grace. I will fight bravely, you'll see. As brave as Baelor Breakspear," the old man would often say. Now we then get Dunk watching his crush perform a puppet show named Florian the Fool. Florian was both a jester and knight whose stories told in the legends of the first men. Like Dunk, he was not of noble birth, but still made a name for himself. He spied on a woman named John Quill at a bathing site in Maidenpool, and Dunk is obviously sort of doing the same thing with Tanzel. The knight also didn't really have majestic armor, and it's kind of like how Dunk has to use a rope for a belt.
Your belt's made of rope.
Oof, still fucking hurts that one, mate. Dunk is obviously smitten with her though, and he comes to tip her for both the puppet shows. I love the way she's initially on a platform as well, so she seems taller than him, but then when she steps down, they're almost the same height. Egg then shows himself to be very, very smart, as he guesses that the fire trick was achieved by using pollen. He's clearly been educated and is just laying the groundwork for what he goes on to be. Now, she explains how her uncle builds the puppets while she paints them. He then goes on to ask her to basically paint his shield, and in the book he thinks about how Olin's brown always seems so dull and he wants something more colourful, but isn't exactly sure exactly what the design will be.
All men are fools. All men are knights.
Again, he's absolutely dim, as she literally just quoted the play he's just watched. But I don't think he was focused on that itself. However, A Fool in a Night fits well for the character, and it's a play that plays into the show really well. He eventually says that he wants a field at sunset, and Egg suggests an elm tree. Dunk then finishes it off, saying that they also need a shooting star. It's of course just like the end of the previous episode, and it's something that can bring him good luck. If he needs some other stuff he look great in though, then he should definitely check out our merch store right below the video. There, we've just launched our t-shirt inspired by art from the book, and we have lots of other ones to make your nerdy dreams come true. If you buy more than one as well, you'll also get a discount, and it all goes towards helping videos like this get made. He then introduces himself as Duncan the Tall, and she gives her name, which is Tanzel Too Tall. So yeah, they're sharing some commonality. He then bumbles and says that she's just tall enough.
4.
It's party.
Now they kind of combine a scene from earlier in the book, and there when he spoke to her, he talked about how he'd not have to kneel down to kiss her, which he blurts out. And my man must have been pitching a pavilion. It's through this that the book also reveals that Dunk is in fact a virgin, with the line, "Dunk had never been with a girl, and they made him nervous. Once 3 years passed when the old man's purse was full after half a year in the service of blind Lord Flornant. He told Dunk the time had come to take him to a brothel and make him a man. He'd been drunk though, and when he was sober he did not remember. Dunk had been too embarrassed to remind him. He was not certain he wanted a whore anyway. If he could not have a high-born maiden like a proper knight, he wanted one who at least liked him more than his silver." Luckily, Egg comes in a clutch with a save and says, "Puppets."
It's a puppet!
The pair then have a debrief like they hit the club last night.
Oi, 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 oi. Hold it down, boy. Your head's getting blurred. I know you can't stop thinking of her.
Dunk doesn't feel it went well, but Egg hilariously says that they're both gigantic, so it's gonna work out, mate. And yeah, it does kind of remind me a lot of Tormund being obsessed with Brienne. Albeit, Dunk handles things like it's a bit of a Richard Curtis movie. Egg then asks him if he'll ever be a knight, and Dunk says, "Why not? You're a likely lad." Now this reminded me last week of the flashback where Dunk asked Arlen if he would ever be a knight as well.
Am I to be a knight one day, sir? As you are?
There, Arlen never responded, but yeah, Dunk's trying to be as good as the false memories of Arlen that he has. Also, in case you're not from the UK, a likely lad is someone who shows potential.
Bloody hell.
Egg then says he's small, even for his age, but Dunk says he'll grow, and then says people tell him he's stupid, so it's not like it matters. But Egg, mate, you're supposed to say no, you're not stupid, you're very intelligent. No, you're not Dunk the Lunk. The banter between the two is really, really good though, and they're kind of like opposites, because obviously one's a giant, one's really small, one's Dunk the Lunk and stupid, and one's quite intelligent. So they work really well together as kind of an odd couple pairing. The strength is tested in the next scene though, when Lionel Baratheon requests Dunk help in the war. Well, tug of war that is. And the only tug Dunk planned was over Tanzel. Thank you, thank you.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Lionel then shows his true self and his nobility and says,
What is this piss froth?
Dunk will only drink the ale, cider or wine that he can get his hands on, while Lionel has access to the best drinks in the realm. It is important to pay attention to that, and this scene in general also foreshadows the battles that can be seen in the trailer in which they'll have to work together. Pull you bastard, Ned, you bastard, it's me, Robert Baratheon, Ned. Oh, Bessie, Bessie's tits. Whew, coughed up there, talking about Bessie's tits. If I die, I hope that's how I go. Now, this is of course peacetime, and thus all the knights are having to basically compete in jousts and tugs of war as a way to prove their strength. Lionel has to gain his honour and notoriety by engaging in a sport like this instead of on the battlefield. It reminds me a lot of something that Caitlin Stark said when she said that Renly's camp is just full of summer knights. These are people who are just performative knights and haven't really seen the battlefield, so they're not very useful in a real combat situation.
Come, let us gingerly touch our tips.
Now they're against a team that contains a Tyrell, and Lionel's once again the life of the party. Half his lines, I can't even say here, lest we be demonetized, but the spirit of Robert Baratheon was running through me veins, Ned. It was running through me veins. Bessie's tits! Lionel then heads off to get a drink while the rest of his team struggles. It again shows his privilege as he's left the hard work to the lower born people and claims glory at the end. The show's of course added a lot more to his story though, and he's absolutely hilarious. He acts like a proper rugby lad and even slaps Dunk on the arse. The guy who plays Dunk is of course an ex-rugby player, and overall it's just a great way to show his strength. They were a man down for a bit, but Dunk as the anchor has kept them in the game. He also uses his footwork to win, which shows he's not as thick as people say. Later that day, he then goes looking for some armor, and we finally meet Steely Pate. Now, they did reorder this, and he should have appeared last week, but it's a great transition to have him here as we head into the night. The book describes the merchants, and even mentions a Tyroshi with a big blue fancy beard. They're all showing off though, whereas Dunk goes to the guy who's working on his craft, and it shows he isn't as stupid as they say, as he's going to the best there is. It's a great bit of casting, as Pate looks just like the illustration in the book. The dialogue's also exactly the same as the text, and Pate seems to doubt that Dunk will be a champion. Everyone here means to be the best of the best of the best, sir.
Because you're looking for the best of the best of the best, sir.
Or at least wants to be. But Dunk needs it more than most. He then says that you do good work, which is a line just like the book, and Dunk then asks for a gourd git, which is a thing that goes around your neck to protect the throat and chest, and I hope I've pronounced it right. He also needs greaves that cover his legs and helmet. Pate also explains in the book why he designs helmets the way that he does. There's no visor, Egg pointed out. There are air holes. Visors are a point of weakness, Steely Pate had said as much. If you knew how many knights have taken arrows in the eye as they lifted their visors for a suck of cool air, you'd never want one, he told Dunk. Pate is also impressed by Dunk's size, but mentions that he's armoured bigger. Pate references the other merchants from the book, saying that he has simple armour with nothing like gold or the like. Dunk's luck then hits again as Pate offers a discount, seemingly taking pity on the hedge knight. Well, as they say, good manners get you everywhere, but nice guys unfortunately often finish last. Unfortunately, his house and armour will be ransomed, and if he loses, there's no way he's going to be a knight after that. Even now, it's kind of contentious, as Lionel said last week that a knight without a horse is no knight, and thus he's playing the endgame for a short-term game. Dunk has a nice moment with her horse though, but ultimately he has to say goodbye. Kind of reminded me a lot of Sylvester Stallone, as he had to sell his dog to get the money for Rocky. However, after it was a big success, you know, Rocky's obviously a household name, he went back and bought the dog, but yeah, massive gamble. I think him selling the horse as well, you know, just makes Pate feel a bit more sympathetic, and in general, like normally hedge knights are quite looked down upon. The book describes how most of the merchants see them, but I think, you know, you just look at Dunk, you instantly warm to him because he's very sincere and has a genuine good heart. And it's kind of why, like, Lionel likes him as well. Hedge knights in general, though, have a very poor reputation, and they're often seen as little more than beggars with a sword. This has led to most merchants not trusting them, and it's why Dunk's looked down upon by everyone, from stable boys to horse. But yeah, basically he has to sell the horse, and then he pawns off some of Arlen's old gear to lower the cost. And I've been there, mate, playing Baldur's Gate 3. The armor's obviously one of the last things he has of the old man, and the horse in general has just been a bloody good friend, and I'm not crying, you're crying. I love the attention to detail on the fires though, as he says goodbye and we can see the moon and sun on them. which fits in really well with the son of House Ashford. It's a very tearful farewell though, and something that's unfortunately common in this land. Dunk had a massive love for his horses, and this was something that Sir Arlen actually warned against. He said that a knight shouldn't love a horse too much, as a few will die under you. However, the old knight also didn't take his own advice, and yeah, if you've got a pet, it's very difficult to not get attached. The old man always said that a knight should never love a horse, since more than a few were likely to die under him. But he never heeded his own counsel either. Dunk had often seen him spend his last copper on an apple for Old Chestnut, or some oats for Sweetfoot and Thunder. But Dunk has to sell his friends here, and just like his former master, he spent coin on her when he needed all the cash he could. And it's kind of how I felt when I traded in my GameCube for my Xbox 360. Mario Sunshine for Halo 3 seemed like a fair trade at the time, but I still remember. In the book, they also have a scene bartering back and forth with the Horse Lord where Dunk wants 3,000 stags for it, but all he gets offered is 300. Eventually, he gets the guy up to 750, which just about covers the armor. But there's the feeling that it was closer to the buyer's price than Dunk wanted, so yeah, it does still feel like it's a massive loss. In the book, he then promises that if he'll win, he'll come back and buy him. He then bites another gold coin, saying he's never tasted gold before, but you get the feeling that it's definitely bittersweet. As he says goodbye, he makes sure the horse gets some oats and apples, which is also a line from the book. It's been a long day without you, my friend, but I'll tell you all about it when I see you with Egg. The video's a shit, to be honest. You probably should have chosen another breakdown, but he goes back to Egg resolute that the horse has gone, so there's no turning back. The pair then both sit down and have a drink, but Egg looks disgusted by the cider as there's a bug in it. Both he and Lionel did look down on what the small folk were drinking, which is a further tease to things. And I did say pay attention to that before. Dunk then says that Sir Arlen lived for 60 years, but was never a champion. In the book, his mind then starts to wonder that even if he can become a champion for just an hour, Ashford might pay attention to him and finally employ him. Egg then makes fun of him by saying, do you really think the Dragon House employs many hedge knights? Dunk thinks he's got one over than the kid though by saying that Donald of Duskendale is the son of a crabber. And then Egg basically makes him have egg on his face, and we learn that Donald is in fact a Nepo baby. Dunk asks how he knows, but he just kind of shrugs and says he likes fishing, which is a bit suspicious that. And to be honest, it might be a bad secret at this point, but we will discuss things more in the spoiler section. I'm guessing a lot of you people know already though, because we've been shit at covering it up. Now, the reason they don't fight in the tourney is explained by the character in the book. It would not be fitting for us to ride against those we're sworn to protect. Luckily though, Dunk can put it all out of his mind as the tournament starts up. Just like the book, Dunk then puts Egg on his shoulders to watch the festivities. It's one of the livelier tourneys that we've ever seen in the series, and it looks like it's a right laugh. I think in general it's just one of the best, if not the best joust scenes that I've ever seen, and it's just really visceral throughout. This entire thing just kind of reminds me a lot of the Quidditch World Cup campsite, and I think this scene is a high point in the show so far. Now, let's talk about the rules if you ever want to play it. Okay, so Gwyn is the Queen of Love and Beauty, and 5 champions are charged with defending her. Other men then challenge them, and if you manage to defeat a champion, then you become one yourself. So to Dunk, that means that he may only be a champion for an hour, but if he defeats someone, he'll have an hour of glory. We also see the Baratheon flags and the royals sitting in the box, just like we saw in House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. Lord Medgar Tully appears wearing a cloak described just like the book, and then he Ozzy Osbournes off the head of a trout before throwing it into the crowd. The fish is on their house sigil though, and it's just kind of adding a theatrical side of the house. Kind of like all the apple puns last week. I think in general though, this Tully is fucking oozing aura, and he has much more charisma than the other Tullys that we've seen, like Blackfish, fuck the lad. We then see the Grey Lion Lannister being armed by their squire while the Tully gets his shield. Lionel Baratheon then gets up on his horse and wears a ridiculously large antler helmet. Then there's Sir Abla Hightower. We've of course seen the Hightowers in House of the Dragon, with Otto and Alicent coming from the house. You can see his shield as well, which has the Hightower sigil, which is a tower with flame. Lastly, we have Prince Vaelor, the son of Baelor, who in the book faced off against Sir Ablar. Now, Ashford, despite having loads of money and the Targaryens in his backwater village, is still disrespected by his subjects. They call him a sheep shagger basically, and I love the sly look that Baelor makes as well as the little chuckle that Maekor does. It shows that money doesn't buy respect, and even though they're at the party, yeah, people fucking hate the lad. The fight then starts up and it's shot so well as we fly behind the team and we get a satisfying smash of lance against shield. Lord Leo Tyrell and rearms, and you can also see Sir Humphrey Hardying with his red and white diamond attire. The Hardings are a house sworn of the Vale of Arryn, and in the book he actually faced off against Humphrey Beesbury. It was known as the Battle of the Humphrey. You may recognise the Beesbury name as well, as Criston Cole killed Lord Beesbury in House of the Dragon Season 1. Baelor then faces off against Ablor, just like the book. Dunk then thinks he could easily enhorse the prince, and thinks he may have been matched against easier opponents due to his title. We then see a House Ashford knight, which is most likely one of Lord Ashford's sons, either Andrew or Robert. The reality of the violence really starts to sink in for Dunk though, and he starts to have a panic attack watching it all go down. It's a tough fight, and yeah, you can even risk dying against a bad jouster. If their technique's off and they hit somewhere other than your shield, you know, who knows what's going to happen. I think he realises he's just out of his depth and starting to question if he's able to do it. We then cut to Egg playing soldier, all pumped up on the action. He's pretending to be fighting in the Blackfire Rebellion that Arlen also fought in, which is something else that might stick out if you're paying attention. Dunk then asks if great knights live in the hedges and die by the side of muddy roads. He then seems to come clean with himself about what Sir Arlen was really like, mentioning how he drank in Horde, had no friends or was ever a champion. It seems that this basically destroyed his image of the old man. However, he also remembers that Arlen did what really mattered. He raised Dunk to be honourable and look after him more than most men would. It's almost personal now though, as no one remembered Arlen's name. Dunk wants to show them what Arlen produced and that he is a strong and chivalrous knight. And that's how we wrap up the episode, and for the next bit I want to go into the spiral section, so if you don't want to know, then hopefully I'll see you next week, and I thank you for coming on the journey. And I know you love the Baratheon impressions, you're fucking amazing, everyone loves them, they'll fucking love them. 'Tis an honour to leave a comment as well, and hit the thumbs up before you go, and I bid thee farewell. Okay, so Lionel has become an instant fan favourite, and my Twitter feed at the moment is just full of gifs of the character and actor. Lionel becomes very important, and he ends up aiding Dunk in his hour of need, which kind of builds off Dunk aiding him in the tug of war. In the book, what happens is that Aerion attacks Tansel after seeing a show about slaying dragons. Dunk stands up for her, and he's then put on trial. He then has to recruit 7 knights to join his side, and this will be a 7 versus 7 in a trial of the 7. One of them is of course Lionel, and they're kind of fleshing out his character here to give him much more of a reason to do it. In the book, he didn't really have much of a presence, but I like that they're just adding more stuff in to kind of play off later down the line. Lionel just being a big fan of Dunk is just such a great way of forming their friendship, and I feel in general these are some good moments added into the show as they make Lionel joining Dunk in his hour of need much more impactful. It also adds just some good foreshadowing for us book fans. Moving on to Dunk's Squire Egg, in the book the pair wake up at the camp in the morning and Dunk notices that he has almost purple eyes. Now this is something that Dunk also later notices in Prince Aerion. He says that he has violet eyes and notices it amongst almost all the Targaryens. In case you don't know, in the book the Targaryens pretty much all have purple eyes, which they didn't bring to the show because it was probably too much to manage. But it is a characteristic that he notices when he sees Aerion. That beautiful stripling was a prince, he had no doubt. The Targaryens were the blood of the lost Valyria across the sea, and their silver gold hair and violet eyes set them apart from common men. Now, this is also seen in Egg on the Morning for a reason. Egg is actually Prince Aegon, aka one of the missing kids at the moment. The other one was who we saw at the end last week, who left the Targaryen coin on the table. Throughout the episode, Egg obviously touches upon knowing stuff about the lords, and also plays his hand that he is very, very noble. Now shouts to Ryan Airy, bloody Ryan Airy, for pointing out that another clue comes in the fact that Dunk tosses Egg in the air. We then cut to fire, and this hints that he is one of the Targaryens, which is a rubbish Easter egg, and I won't be including it in this video.
Shut the f*** up, Ryan Airy!
As mentioned, he has a very simplistic view of the world, and doesn't really understand why Dunk has to do undignified things like begging people to remember Arlen. The young prince has of course always been around power, and that's all he knows. This coming journey with Dunk though will completely change his worldview, and it will actually lead to him avoiding the family's tradition of incest. He ends up becoming kind of the small folk, and his time with Dunk here is really crafting that view. Now with Baelor, it seems like he will become a good king, but book readers will know that he perishes in the trial of the 7. He actually ends up joining Dunk as one of the 7 knights, and it has massive repercussions. This then alters the course of the realm, and it leads into Dany and Jon being born and subsequently saving the world. So yeah, very important that all these characters are meeting, and though it seems like the stakes are very low at the moment, they're actually not. Now Dunk in this episode also gets to meet a couple of the King's Guard. Donald of Duskendale is one of them, and he's a certified badass. In this story, he actually manages to kill Sir Humphrey Beesbury during the trial of the 7. And yeah, the interaction here is kind of setting that all up. Now, the story of Dunk and Egg in general just leads to the boy becoming Egg on the 5th and Dunk being part of the King's Guard. He then eventually becomes the Lord Commander, and he does indeed become a great knight after all. So all these things that we're seeing here are just setting up what's to come, and yeah, introducing the characters like this, fleshing them out in the way that they have, I think it works really well, because yeah, they're setting a lot of things in motion. Now, talking about the future and how we're getting what's coming down the line, after writing our episode 1 breakdown, the Hollywood Reporter actually dropped a huge interview with George R.R. Martin. We have broken that down on the channel and basically what they discussed in it, but he has plans for more novellas than just the 3 that are currently published about Dunk and Egg. I did fear that it would be like a Game of Thrones 8th season again, where the show ran out of track and then just made stuff up, and it really struggled. However, Martin has apparently handed over 12 ideas, lots of unpublished manuscripts, and this will basically flesh out things going forward, so there's at least a structure in place. Martin has said that this might be his favourite of the Game of Thrones stories, which is why he's written so many of them behind the scenes. But again, yeah, we broke down the full article on the channel. There's lots of other things that he says in it that I think they're definitely worth checking out. So yeah, go head over to there right after this. Anyway, that wraps up this breakdown. And again, massive thank you for coming on this journey. Please drop a like at the video, and of course, leave a comment with all your thoughts below. And if you want to follow us on Instagram and keep up to date with what we're doing, then make sure you check us out at Heavy Spoilers. Every week as well, we also drop a video early for members of the channel, so if you want to see a big breakdown before anyone else, it costs just 99 cents a month. It makes a massive difference and means we can make these videos and basically put all our effort into making the best content possible for you guys. And again, it's less than $12 a year. I know there's lots of channels who charge extortionate amounts, but we try and keep this low, so it seems like more of a bargain, and thank you for all you guys' support, because it really means a lot. I'm not slagging off on other channels there, they can charge what they want, but I don't want to rip people off, and I feel bad even charging you for that, but we really appreciate the support. And yeah, like I said, just makes a massive difference to us. Now, if you want something else to watch, guess what? We've got a breakdown on screen right now, that George R.R. Martin interview. Hopefully I see you over there right after this, but if not, thank you for sticking through this video. I've been your host, Paul. You be the best. I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.